I think the innovation will really prove to separate strong and weak companies as we come out of it, and that you see strong companies now accelerating their efforts to innovate, because an innovation takes 2 years from start to when you're ready to launch it very often, and 2 years from now the economy is going to have turned around, business will be growing, and companies that begin to develop the products now will be ready and launching them when the economies take off. Companies that wait until the economy takes off to become innovative will find themselves bringing those on stream when the economy starts to flag again. A great illustration, this is process innovation, not product innovation, but there was a great American industrialist named Andrew Carnegie who really built Carnegie Steel, which was the anchor of our industrial economy in the late 1800s. And Carnegie had a policy that when the economy turned down, he would expand capacity. Because it took 3 or 4 years to build a steel mill and bring it on. And so just as the economy was turning around and the demand for steel picked up, there was Carnegie with his latest state-of-the-art plant ready to fuel that demand. His competitors always built their mills when they were out of capacity. And so then they came on stream when the economy was going down the other side and found themselves having to sell it off because they had this heavy fixed cost and so on. And I think there's a general principle there.
And you were going to go to another example.
It's Johnson & Johnson, the big medical products company. Mm-hmm. They really have bought into the notion that healthcare becomes affordable only if we disrupt. In other words, we have to bring technology to outpatient clinics so we can do there more and more of the things that previously had required a higher cost hospital. Bring technology to doctors' offices so you can do there more and more of the things that required a clinic, and then do in the home things that required a doctor's office. And they basically have a team of marketing people wandering around the world, just looking at where's a doctor doing something where we could bring technology so that a nurse could do it perfectly well. Where are they doing it in a hospital so our technology would enable you to do it in a doctor's office? Because it is by enabling lower cost venues of care and lower cost caregivers to do more sophisticated things. That's how you make healthcare affordable. And so, just as an example, there are a lot of procedures that actually could be done in a doctor's office, but you can't do it because it requires anesthesia, and to deliver anesthesia you have to have an anesthesiologist present. But you can't have an anesthesiologist hanging around your office in the off chance that day you want to do a procedure. And so you have to refer the procedures with anesthesia involved to the hospital where the anesthesiologist is. Well, Johnson & Johnson developed this technology where the anesthetic takes effect and wears off within a minute. So rather than give you a big batch of anesthetic that puts you out for a period of time, they just do it on a continuous basis. So if something goes wrong, you just shut it off, and within a minute the patient is fully resuscitated. And then the anesthesiologists have these algorithms in their brains where they'll combine blood pressure and pulse rate and other other signals from the patient into an algorithm, and they'll say, yeah, I'll give them a little more anesthesia, a little less anesthesia. And so Johnson & Johnson just built those algorithms into a little computer box at the side of the patient's bed. And they made it so foolproof that a nurse can do it just as well as the anesthesiologist can. And in fact, because the computer is very consistent, the error rate, or in other words, complications that arise due to anesthesia, is reduced by a factor of 13x when a nurse does it. And so now this technology allows doctors to do many procedures in their office But formerly they had to refer to a much higher cost hospital. And Johnson & Johnson's technology drives that, towards the lower cost venue of care. And that's the kind of innovation, especially when we're, battling budget problems and so on, that really will create a lot of value.
You have, in the last years, done a lot of work in two big areas. One is healthcare, and you've shared a great example. And the other area is education. And it's funny because when we think innovation, we don't think of education, much less disruptive innovation. Why don't you frame the challenge and the opportunity that you have in applying disruptive innovation to education?
The reason we got into it was some of the leading education innovators in America came at me and said, at their core, the reasons why our schools can't improve are problems of managing innovation. And so they asked me to join with them to examine education through the lenses of my research on innovation, rather than trying to study the schools statistically to figure out how to make the schools better. So that's been the game that we've been engaged in for about 10 years. And we reached a couple of conclusions that I just had never thought about before. And one is that there is a business model that has evolved in education whose roots are in the late 1800s, when manufacturing technology evolved to the point that you made products in big batches. That batch manufacturing model, which was so low cost and so efficient relative to prior technologies, got imported into our schools. And the idea was just bring in the students by batch, stick them all in a room, and lecture to them. And that was actually a good technology for that time. But what we've learned now is that there are different types of intelligence. In fact, there are probably 8 different types of intelligence. And you should never call anybody smart or dumb, because all of us are quite smart in a couple of types of intelligence and quite clueless in a couple of other types. And so when you're a teacher in front of a big batch of students, you teach in a way that's consistent with your type of intelligence. What it means is 7/8 of the students out there aren't learning at all, or they're learning in a very inefficient way. And so, for example, when I was taking physics in high school, my physics teacher, Mr. Steve, taught physics by writing equations on the board. And my best friend, Robert Graves, he could see these equations and just visualize how the whole universe operated. And I would see the equations and simply begin to pray that I would be able to memorize them long enough to pass the exam, after which I would just totally, wipe my brain clean. Now I realize that the reason Rob got it and I didn't get it wasn't that he was smarter, but he has a type of intelligence called mathematical symbolic intelligence. And my type is spatial. I can see patterns and things. I'm really very good at that. Well, the problem was that Mr. Steed's brain was wired like Rob Graves' brain. And so the two of them just sang to each other all period long. And occasionally Mr. Steed would look at me and he couldn't get why I couldn't get it. And I just have a different type of brain. Well, how do you solve this problem? That you've got one teacher in front whose own brain is wired to the dominant type of intelligence in that industry. Or another type of intelligence is verbal linguistic intelligence. And so we teach spelling to the verbal linguistic mind. It's taught by a verbal linguistic mind to a verbal linguistic mind. And Rob Graves over here, with a mathematical symbolic mind, he can't get spelling. Not only can he not spell, he doesn't care that he can't spell, right? And so this is the problem, is that we need to be able to customize the way we teach to fit the way our brains are genetically or in early childhood wired to learn. And the only way to do that is to migrate the delivery of the content to software and not obligate teachers to deliver the content. There's so many other things teachers can do, but the reason why we need to migrate it to software is it can be readily customized. So when Clay is learning physics, he learns it with diagrams and patterns, and Rob learns it with math, and other people learn it with story problems. But we can all learn it in very profound and useful ways, but it has to fit the way our brains are wired to learn. And then migrating the instruction to the computer is actually quite disruptive to the teacher. Now, in the end, the teachers are better off because they tutor students rather than lecture to them. But what it requires, the theory of disruption says, is don't try to force the computer into the same classroom system that the teacher is teaching in, because she can only use the computer in ways that support the existing model of instruction. But rather, you've got to deploy computer-based learning against non-consumption, where you have schools that don't have the scope to offer the class, or where you're having students who are homeschooled and so on. And then little by little, computer-based learning will get better and better and draw courses one by one from conventional instruction to the new. And when that happens, then students will be able to learn in ways that their brains are wired to learn. Teachers will spend their time tutoring individual students, not lecturing and controlling the crowds. And it'll be a much better outcome, but we have to do it right.
Our business has definitely changed a lot over time. Originally, back in 1999, 11 years ago when we first started, the original business idea was, let's just have a large selection of shoes and let's just have a dropship relationship with a lot of different manufacturers, so we never have to hold any inventory. So in 2003, 4 years into it, we at that time had started doing a hybrid approach where 25% of our revenues were from dropship